And I say it will go up onto the we've got a CDAF YouTube page, I think, Shay, haven't we? Now we've got a CDAF page, so we can put it up there as well. Okay, well, how lovely to see you all this afternoon. I must send apologies from Joan Ballantyne, our chair of CDAF, who unfortunately is still mid presentations with mid presentations on our MSc research projects, I think, with her students. So she might get in and join us, but she may not be able to make it. So apologies from Joan. And I will so I'm just letting a couple more people in from the waiting room, and while they come in. And yeah, Siobhan, I will remind me. I've just had a message from Siobhan. Remind me, we'll do that as well. Siobhan's just asked me to do something, so she can remind me to do so as we go through. So this was just, the whole intention was, for some of you that might have attended our session, workshop session with the professional bodies back at the beginning of October, which was a really, really useful session. And I know that Dominic is here from the ICAW. He's just joined us. And we found it was a really useful session, I think, for all of us. But what we felt that we perhaps lacked was the opportunity just to have an informal chat. And if you perhaps, if you want me to, at some stage during this meeting, if you want me to sort of just go into breakout rooms, that's quite easy to do if you wanted to have a sort of a smaller group chat. But I think it was meant to be relatively informal in terms of just trying to sort of garner from each other what we're doing, how it's going, and how have we been able to sort of move the accreditation side of things on in our own universities, and that sort of thing. So I don't know whether Paul has anything to add that we can start up with, or
yeah, just to say, really, we didn't have a formal agenda for this meeting, but because of the amount of interest and engagement that we got from the I'm just slightly distracted by looking at Jo's screen and seeing that she's actually got a bit of competition with the camera there, which I think is probably something that's happened to all of us at some point over the last few weeks. So yeah, it was the level of interest and the level of engagement was such that we thought it was worth meeting up again, and we said in normal times we'd probably have arranged to meet up somewhere near a friendly bar late in the afternoon, but obviously these aren't normal times, so we can't do that. And we thought that an informal conversation would probably be quite good, really from a point of view of just sharing ideas and sharing best practice. So no formal agenda as such, but obviously there is an amount of interest here. It would be worth keeping on top of. If anyone didn't attend the meeting in October, there is a recording of that meeting available. That's on, we've got a YouTube channel. Now all the BAFA groups have got YouTube channels, so I put a recording of that meeting up on the CDAF YouTube channel if anyone wants to catch up on that. And that was, if anyone hasn't seen that, it's probably worth looking at, because it was a very, very good discussion about some of the challenges that we're facing with moving to alternative assessments. How do we assess students if we can't do traditional face-to-face exams? How do we keep our accreditation if we're not doing traditional face-to-face exams? And the professional bodies, ICAW, ICAS, were all attended that meeting as well, and we got some very useful feedback and support out of them. And I think one of the key messages to come out of that meeting, and hopefully Dominic would agree with this, is that we should talk to the professional bodies. It's not the case that they want to have a one rule fits all, but they're actually very keen on talking what would work best for us as an institution, as well as for our students.
I can jump in there, Paul. Can you,
Yeah,
can you hear
please
me,
do,
Kirsty?
Yeah.
Yeah, just to echo what you've said there, and probably what Judy said and Dominic said when they presented last time, is this is a continuing, unfolding thing that we're having constant dialogues with our regulator, the FRC. So, you know, that's partly why we're here today, really, partly to get inspiration for our conference that we run for HEIs in January, but also to just offer continued assistance, because obviously Judy is in constant contact with the FRC about how long we can keep the current changes in place for, and how we're doing with remote invigilation and things like that. So the more information we have from you, the better informed those conversations with the FRC are, really.
So picking up just on that particular point of remote invigilation, certainly what we found was that most of the remote invigilation packages we looked at were quite expensive. It's probably fair to say that a lot of universities either can't or don't particularly want to spend more money than is absolutely necessary at the moment, because they're all facing a drop in income and an increase in expenses, and they're very reluctant to actually make that to meet that quite significant cost of remote invigilation. So we got the sense, certainly from the last meeting, from talking to colleagues in universities informally, we've got the sense that people are finding alternative ways to make sure they've got a valid assessment. And if remote invigilation isn't a possibility, then we almost go to a situation where we have exams where it doesn't make an awful lot of difference if you're invigilated or not, in the sense that if you have an open book exam, then it becomes less mission critical to find out whether or not someone's got their notes and their books in front of them. And then that on its own changes the sorts of assessments we're doing. If our exams are open, I mean, to give you an example, so on our accounting program at the University of Winchester, we've moved to all open book exams, and obviously that is changing the nature of the assessments that we're doing, because we now can't test knowledge in those assessments. We can test the application of knowledge, and we can test the academic skills that we want the students to develop, but obviously we can't test knowledge as such. So that's almost, in a sense, one of the positives out of that is that I think we'll probably have assessments that are much closer to testing the sorts of skills that we want graduates to have, as opposed to just their ability to memorize information. I guess on the other side of that, my concern is that if there are no closed book exams at all, then how do we make sure that that basic level of knowledge is in place? And that's not something that we've got an easy answer to. I guess the obvious answer is, well, you test knowledge by formative assessment. If the students haven't got any knowledge in place, then they won't be able to do an assessment that tests the application knowledge and skills, because they won't have the starting point there. But it's certainly a challenge in terms of rewriting those assessments and preparing students for those assessments, particularly almost in a sense of teaching students a new way of learning.
Can I just pop in on that? There's sort of two points on that in terms of the proctoring side of things. I'm in Swansea University, and we do have access to Respondus, which is a form of proctoring through our new VLE that we've got, and it's got two elements to it. You can do a lockdown browser on it, and you can also do lockdown browser and have the sort of Respondus software, which does the sort of the proctoring part as opposed to just the locking down of the browser. We've kind of steered away from that, really, because it involves us as academics writing all of the papers, etc. I mean, yes, we write our exam paper, but actually formatting the test, doing it all. And if you lock the browser down, it's got to be input through the Canvas package. We're using Canvas, so therefore we have to write the tests so that they are formatted and squeaky clean in terms of final formatting, which generally, if we write an exam paper, it gets moderated and we do our best to align it all and everything, but it generally goes to your assessment team, who then take it off your hands and do everything with it for you. And that's part of the problem that we perhaps have with we don't have the administrative capacity or the academic capacity to write and to format and to do all of that side of things in terms of our exam papers at the moment. The VLE for us is new. We've gone to online teaching and also changed our VLE all at the same time. So it's been absolutely horrendous for us. So it may be in a year's time, when we are more proficient at writing tests, etc., and quizzes within the package, it might be easier for us to do, and we might be closer to doing that. And the other point that Paul was just making was about the sort of learning how to answer questions. The students have found using and doing quizzes, etc., quite difficult. They found it quite hard, in terms of a different way of doing tests. So we have perhaps got to train our students as well as training ourselves in terms of not just how to answer more applied questions, but how to answer questions more generally. I think in terms of using technology, a lot of them struggle to format Word documents. So if you're asking them to do a table and write their workings, that's taking a lot more time in doing things. And yes, from a marking perspective, I think it's great to be able to read something that's typed up. It's, I finally, rather than doing an exam paper and trying to read somebody's handwriting, but some students are finding the time allowance quite difficult, and if we're restricting people on time and we're expecting them then to format things and etc., that could be something that we need to think about as well.
And I guess this is where we could bring in well, I'm looking at Dominic and Kirsty in particular, because the professional bodies have gone through a similar process in advance of us by moving their exams from paper-based to computer-based. They will have got some valuable insights from students that have experienced both systems and what effect it has on the time pressure. And if either of you can come in on that one and give us a little bit of benefit of your experience.
Well, obviously we've been on computer for a few years now, so that transition from paper to computer had a stream of teething, troubles around it as students got used to it. But with COVID, we had to rather quickly bring remote invigilation in. So we've run 2 sessions now on remote invigilation, where students have had a choice of centre or remote invigilation. The first one was we were literally, flying by the seat of our pants, and it was notable how the second time around, everything was a lot calmer. Students had kind of read and digested the guidance a bit better. Time pressure, is a thing, and there are new things to do with RI, like they need to check their equipment before the exam starts and things like that. So we haven't altered the time of the exam, because we think that the time pressure built into the exam is part of the qualification and kind of the skills that the students need to bring with it. But in terms of the guidance we've put out and webinars and support we've done for students, it's all about getting your head around how to use this new system and be comfortable and not necessarily panic if the connection drops out or things stop recording. And to try and focus on actually be resilient. Where it might have failed a few times for students, the majority, over 90%, did finish the exam. And that's what we're calling on students to do, is to show that resilience and don't give up at the first hurdle if the technology fails for a few minutes. So the last session was just a worlds apart in terms of how students coped with it. So we're hoping that continues, and obviously the preference was for centres. Those places were locked down, had no choice and went to RI, but where there was a choice, there was still a preference to be in a centre. But feedback from the student questionnaires wasn't as negative about RI as we might have assumed, and students said they would give it a go again, and the benefit of sitting at home in their own environment was really positive. And so going forward, we're thinking, you know, if we continue this, it might really help with our students that have access arrangements and find it difficult to travel and would benefit from being in their own environment to do their exams. So yes, it's been a learning curve, and we've opted for a record and review approach. So it's not a live proctor on the watching the students, everything's recorded, and then the proctor can go through and then share with us any issues that they think might have been problems or potential cheating or things like that within the exam, that we can have a second look at the videos and go through them slow motion and watch what was actually going on. So massive learning curve for us, but we do feel like we're coming out the other side now, and lots of benefits for the students that have been involved.
Can I bring in Anne there? Anne's got her hand up, and so if I could ask Anne to join us.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. I'm from the University of Manchester, where we have quite large cohorts of students, many of whom at the moment are in China rather than in the UK. So we've obviously been moving to remote invigilation with some trepidation. We did obviously run a lot of I'll give some background, and then I've got a question for Paul at the end of this on open book exams. So in terms of what we've done on remote invigilation, we ran a lot of online tests for our summer assessments, and we were very concerned about how well the technology would hold up, given that we knew that a lot of our students were possibly in quite remote areas where they could potentially have a lot of technical problems connecting. Actually, we found that it all worked very smoothly. I mean, on some of our courses, we have over 700 students, and actually we had very, very few problems, which we were extremely relieved about. We did have problems with tests not being robust enough in the summer in terms of question setting, and we're obviously addressing that for our January assessment. And one thing that we're doing in order to try and solve some of the problems is that for a number of exams, we're having a two-part assessment, where part of the assessment is via MCQ test, and then part is via narrative style questions in order to test the conceptual understanding rather than just knowledge and application. We did try that on some of our exams in the summer, and that worked quite well, and it gave us the opportunity obviously to mediate, so that if somebody in their haste in setting up their MCQ test made it too easy, there were opportunities to pull back some of that by how we were reviewing and marking and grading the essay style element of the exams. We have finally, it's taken me 5 months, and our university has finally agreed that we can have responders as a form of remote invigilation. But I share other people's views that actually it's not really going to be as robust as some of the other systems that I know the ICAEW recommend, for example, but our university wouldn't pay for anything more. I think responders does give us a bit more robustness, and it does put a bit more pressure on students, but I think some students will still find ways around that quite easily. You know, we get quite worried at Manchester with the volume of bright students that we have. Some of them just spend their time working out a way around the system rather than just getting on and doing the assessment. So we are still, I think, quite concerned about that. And the other problem I've had, I don't know if other people have experienced this, I work for a very large bureaucratic university, and it's really difficult as I'm not even in a department, I'm in a division in a business school, and trying to get the university to recognise the demands of a professional body have been horrendous. At the moment, I'm trying to get a paper through our faculty and then approved by our university, so that I can run 2.5-hour exams over a 24-hour window of access, because that goes against our university policy. We're allowing an extra half hour to allow for the technical problems students have, as we've heard, of putting things in tables, etc. But you know, I'm really up against it with our administration. I have very little admin support myself, and I've just become an administrator since the start of COVID rather than an academic. That's the sort of experience that we've had at Manchester so far. My question for Paul is, if you switch to all open book exams, how do you know that the person submitting the work is the person it's supposed to be, i.e. what is there to stop a student from being substituted by somebody else in their work? And how do you get around that problem in some sort of robust way? It's not an easy question to answer.
No, it's not at all. And the short answer is, without some form of, I mean, yeah, I've used open book exams on my third year elective for quite a few years now. But the students do the open book exam in the exam hall, and they have to show their identity card. So there's actually nothing about open book exams per se that gives you that problem. The problem is that the student is remote, and the simple truth is, if the students are sitting the exams remotely, and if the university has got absolutely no mechanism at all for verifying the identity of the students, then the simple answer is you don't know who they are, and that's all there is to it. And that seems to be there doesn't seem to be a way around that. At the point where an institutional decision is made not to have any kind of invigilation and not to have any kind of identity checks, by default, the institution is also deciding that that is not a risk they're willing to manage. They just accept it. And it's certainly not a decision I'd be comfortable with, but it's a decision way above my pay grade. I'm a humble academic. I write the exam and I mark what anyone gives me.
I find it quite concerning that we seem to be quite happy to continuing in this mode for open book exams. I mean, I share your views. I mean, in many circumstances, open book exams are great in that they are more testing of students' capabilities, aren't they? But I find it extremely worrying that the university is quite happy to sort of not take any responsible view on this. And how far do we as accounting academics dealing with these, well, it's not even just dealing with the rigors of professional body requirements, it's just a basic, you know, even if you weren't dealing with that, it's a basic academic question as to how we can protect our reputation and brand if we are not carrying out any sorts of basic checks in this sort of area. And I do find it really worrying that universities just seem to be turning the other way rather than addressing these questions when they are being put to them, as indeed I can't personally, as I'm not at the right level, but colleagues at faculty level are certainly putting these questions to our university and not getting what we would regard as acceptable or credible answers.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole point about the nature of assessment we're doing is that it's there's a whole world of issues here, and one of the issues is trying to tackle that very particular problem of how do we know students aren't looking at their textbooks and their notes. Well, one response to that is that we make it so they don't get any advantage or disadvantage from looking at their textbook and their notes. But that's an academic decision almost about the nature of the assessment we're doing, and it's an academic response to a practical problem. The underlying practical problem of how do we conduct secure assessments for students is something that has to be answered at an organizational level, not a subject level, because it's not an academic decision, it's a management decision.
Can I bring Greg? Yeah, I've seen Greg has got his hand up, but Julie also. So I was going to go Julie first, and then Greg, if that's okay. So Julie.
Yeah, great, thank you very much. I'm Julie Drake from the University of Huddersfield, and I concur exactly with what Anne was just talking about. I'm in a slightly different situation where we have our exams over a 24-hour period. That's what we did in the summer with the standard time plus 25% for uploading and whatever. Now, the issue that's arisen, and I hope Dominic can cover his ears and this maybe is edited out, is the reality is that in some areas such as auditing, we're able to design out the plagiarism and the cheating. It's easier. Less so when it's over a 24-hour period, because if it's a tax exam or it's a financial accounting exam and it's numerical, because all the students have to do theoretically is take a screenshot, and then because it's available for 24 hours, you can imagine, yeah. So my question is, and what I would like to happen, and the fact that most of my members in my team would like to happen, is that it's actually a real-time exam. So it runs for that 3-hour period, for example, plus 25%, and it's not over 24 hours. And we feel that is the only way where we are going to get robustness on our, particularly on, for example, tax, the more numerical areas. And I'd really appreciate some comments on that, because at the moment the Pro Vice Chancellor is saying, unless I get a notice from my professional bodies, they will insist that the exams are running over a 24-hour period, and then I'm concerned that later on our exemptions may be withdrawn. So that's it in a nutshell, really. Help. Thank you.
Greg.
Can I say, I think the issue of identity is here being somewhat overblown. I know that there are problems, but are these problems really that much different from what we have when we have them in front of us, and a matriculation card with a photograph that's 4 years old, and a student that we may not have really had much contact with in class, and they're pretending to be somebody else? Also, we remember we are relying, I mean, is it right to make the brute assumption that everyone's a cheat, because they're not? And is it right to assume that everyone is breaching the contract that they've written, where they've said that they won't share their identity, etc., etc.? And I know you may laugh at this. I can see Joe laughing over there about this to some extent. I have to say that, I mean, I am concerned about the issue of identity, and are the people sitting the exams really the people who they say they are? But I do think to suggest that it is only a problem in the online space is just naive. And the other point is that, and of course this isn't a perfect check for the very same reason I've just said. What we're beginning to do, what we're reverting to actually is a sort of archaic clause in our exam regulations generally, which is the right to submit students to oral examination, either on a random basis or if there's any doubt about. Normally, it's interpreted as whether they should be on the boundary, but in reality, what we've begun to do is to use it where there may be an authorial integrity by doubt. It's slightly bending the rules in our particular institution. Sorry, I should have said Glasgow University, for those of you who don't know. But I think this is an issue to bear in mind, and all these remote proctoring devices suffer the same problems as any identity issue do, as well as the problem. I mean, do you know that I'm looking at my other screen that's underneath it, which I am? I mean, does it look like I'm looking at you, or does it look like I'm looking down at another screen and reading my other computer, which is under here. I mean, I can point to it, but I can see it perfectly well. In fact, with the glasses I've got on, I can see that screen somewhat better than I can see the screen I'm looking at, because I wear varifocals. So, you know, it's I think there's a degree of myth over whether these proctoring systems really do anything more than make the cheats more devious. Perhaps it does some things, but the other thing, going back to the really more substantive issue, is the issue about making open book testing reliable. I mean, I think we're moving to a world where knowledge in itself is pretty useless. People need to have it to be able to deal with things in a relatively timely manner, which is the only reason, in a sense, that the institutes, etc., and we traditionally have set timed exams. And we use the reasoning that this is a replication of a real world client-facing situation. That's the only way that we've got it through our committees, and then partly reneged on, I have to say, because of technical issues for the December round, but we expect to get it back for June. You know, in terms of application, yeah, perhaps that's something we're testing too. But I mean, if you look at the ILOs or learning objectives, whatever you have in your institution, for your main degrees, I mean, they're probably around things like critical awareness, probably not a very good verb to use, awareness, but being able to critically discuss, evaluate, synthesize these things. So most of the grading shouldn't be for that mechanical stuff anyway. So if it's only affecting a very small percentage and probably more low-level things, does it really matter for the degree? Of course, this is a different issue when you come to thinking about exemptions, because quite a lot of the exemptions are based on lower level exams. In our institution, I think pretty much for all of our accreditation bodies, nothing in our final year counts towards accreditation. So that is a potential issue, and yeah, we perhaps need to address it some way. But I'm sorry, I just don't want people to think that we're, you know, there's a chimera of authenticity when you have face-to-face, which I think is not necessarily as obvious as you think it is when you actually dig into how devious cheats might be. Anyway, we don't, until we do biometric testing of students, and I don't know any university in the UK that does that, I'm not sure that we really know. But, sorry, that's the end of my piece, I think.
No, thank you, Greg. Really useful, really useful. I've got 3 hands up. I apologise if I didn't see the order of which way they went up in terms of the hands raised. I was doing a bit of note taking myself, so I'm going to start just on my screen. I've got Hafez first, then Joe, and then back to Julie, if that's okay. So Hafez.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm just want to make an observation here about what and Greg just said about identity and open book. In the normal time before COVID, universities used to ask students to prepare assessment based on coursework and assignments. The identity and who does the work was still an issue there, because any student can ask their peers, colleagues, friends, whoever, to do the coursework for them. Now we don't live in normal time, and we are learning now from experience. Now, the other point I want to refer to is the real exam, the real-time exam, and what we've done at the University of Nottingham in my division for some exam related to exemptions. We had some rooms opened in MS Teams, and we had students lined up at the same time to take the exam. We released the exam paper at the same time for everyone, and one member of staff was kind of invigilating 5 to 60 students at the same time. So we had them in the same room, and I can't pop in from one room to the other. So before the exam started, we asked the students to show us around their desk and table, etc. And we we asked them to put a camera behind them so we can see their screen and their desk. And we were there relating. I know it was tiring, it was difficult, and it was time consuming as well. But in my view, it was conducted as if it's a normal real-life exam. But it required a lot of stuffing because each member of staff was allowed to emulate 5 to 6 students at the same time. So there is a way around it, but I know colleagues refer to resources and stuffing, etc. Again, we are not living normal life now, so we have to find a way to do things. And I know the professional bodies, they are very keen to have when they offer exemptions, they are very keen to have similar exams. I mean, exams conducted in the similar ways as pre-COVID. And this is something for professional bodies. They need to take into account what's going on here. They need to take into account the difficulties we experience as academics, as universities, and as students as well. My son is in the next room. We are in Nottingham. He's studying in Leicester University. He wants to go to Leicester, but he can't. So as a student, he's stressed out. And academics and institutions and professional bodies should take these difficulties into account. So open book, yeah, there is restriction, limitations, and drawbacks. Assignments the same, even exams, real-time exams the same. So as I said when I started talking, we are learning by experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Hafez. Jo.
I was going to apologise to Greg for laughing, but I did actually, I have university age children, and at the time of the exams I did ask them whether if they were doing an online exam would they cheat, and they said they would, and all of their friends said they would. So I don't think they see it as cheating. I think they see it as that that opportunity has been given to them. I don't think the identity issue is such an issue. It's more the sharing answers on numerical papers that is the problem. So
don't set them then.
Sorry?
Don't set that sort of question then.
But how are they going to then meet the objectives of the professional body accredited papers?
Can I butt in? Sorry,
Yeah.
because I had this problem. Sara Closs-Davies here. Yeah, sorry to cut across you there, Jo, but I had this problem, and I've put it in the chat box that I recently set up a multiple choice question. And one of the reasons for a multiple choice question was because of exemptions for this particular module, because one of the professional bodies are using this kind of way of assessing knowledge. And I thought, well, if this is going to be online and they're answering either A, B, C, or D, and it's available for 24 hours, because that's our policy at Bangor University in North Wales, then it's going to be so easy for them to, conduct any unfair practice and copy each other and email each other. Oh, the answer to question 1 is A and B, etc. So what I did to try and minimize this was try to, first of all, develop my own IT skills in how to do this. And I got whatever software we use, which is Blackboard, to get Blackboard to randomly select multiple choice questions from a bank, which did involve more work for me in having to, set up additional questions for the bank. But then it's there then for next year and the year after. So, it was work that I would have to have done anyway. So I did that. So the questions were randomized for each student, and also the order of the answers, A, B, C, and D, was also in different order for different students. And I also set it up so that as soon as they started, the multiple choice question test was timed to 90 minutes. So although it's available for 24 hours for students in order to cover those in different time zones, when they started the test, they were very much timed, which made it even harder, I'd like to think, for them to email each other and help each other and see whether they got the same questions or not. So that's all I wanted to contribute, if that's useful to anyone.
I think it is useful. We've thought about that, but it then involves, say you've got 200 students in your cohort and you want to sort of replicate an exam paper, you're going to have at least 10 different questions for each question. So effectively we're writing 10 times as many exam papers. Yeah. Although we can use it in the future possibly, but it's still the work the university is not giving us time to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know whether I should be saying this or not, but you can tell students, look, the question, there's over 100 questions in the question bank, but they're not going to know that you've only got 50 in there. Because then because it's timed and you've said that to them, then they're probably going to give up if they're going to help each other, because they're thinking there's no points.
Yeah.
And we also get the situation where you write your first test or your main test, and then for those students that have got extenuating circumstances, who have an opportunity to do another test, we can't necessarily use the same bank that we've just done of 100 questions, because the administrators say, oh, you've got to have a separate, it's got to be different. So it does then create another whole load of writing a resit paper, or a resit bank of questions as well.
But if you have questions banks which are not just static questions, but questions where the numbers are not just randomly selected but randomly generated, then you have an infinite number of questions. And therefore, we can use technology I hate multiple choice questions for university courses generally, because most of our tests are above the application level. But if we're testing at application level, which is what we are primarily for these things that you're worried about, then the randomized questions with big enough sets, or let's be honest, this is what ICAW and ICAS, I'm not sure about ICAS quite so much, but ACCA do. But I'm talking about ICAW years ago now, and I suspect it's similar. They have massive banks of test questions, written over many years and adapted as necessary, and deleted and tested for reliability, etc. This is just something that if we're going to go down this route, we have to invest in. And if we want integrity of that sort of test, there is no alternative if we're going to do it online. And increasingly, I don't know about other people, but I suspect Manchester's not that different from us. One of our biggest problems is finding exam halls for all these students to do tests, and the university have realised that it's a lot cheaper than hiring halls all around the city to do it online, and there's going to be a massive kickback about ever going back to doing these things in halls. I'm not saying we won't be allowed to do it, but there's going to be a kickback and a need for justification. And perhaps their argument against us doing it will be, well, write proper data sets then, question sets. And
but that does require, I used to write multiple choice questions for the ICAW quite a long time ago now, and they used to pay quite well for me to write just one question. And here we are, well, I'm not personally, but my poor colleagues are churning out loads of these questions for our question banks. I think we can, at the end of the day, I think because of how the professional bodies need to know that our students have a certain level of knowledge, we can't get away from multiple choice questions and how we do that. I think trying to move to a situation where there is no cheating is not realistic. We just have to look at ways of managing and minimizing that as much as possible. I would like to see the professional bodies working better with universities to try and move towards getting better management of these open book style exams, because I would agree with Greg, this is much more where we as universities should be. We're not, a university, yes, it's offering professional body exemptions, and Manchester does have 2 programs accredited with the ICAEW, so we've bought into that. But at the same time, getting a university degree is about, as Greg has said, much more about the conceptual abilities and the critical evaluation aspects of what our students, our graduates, should be aiming towards. And I'd like to see some support on how we manage that in some of these higher level assessments. I think tax, for example, it's really difficult. You know, I mean, how do you set an open book tax exam at the lower levels? It's fine when you move on to tax planning, but when you're testing tax at the intermediate level, I'm sorry, I don't teach tax and I can't remember the name of the course right now, but you know, that is really, really difficult. And I think we would benefit from working together across universities to come up with and the professional bodies to come up with something that will help people setting particularly the intermediate level, the sort of second year undergraduate level papers. I think the first years we can find ways of managing those more easily. I think again the third year a lot of the time we're dealing with courses that are much more at synthesizing and evaluation level, but it's those intermediate exams in the middle that are the ones I think are hardest to deal with. So you know, any ideas that people have on those I think would be really helpful to an awful lot of us.
No, that's a, sorry, just.
Yes, and that's shut everybody up. Sorry, Sarah, I didn't mean.
No, not at all.
The conversation.
Not at all. No, I think I agree. It's just, it's such a dilemma because we're caught betwixt and between, aren't we? That we want, you know, we've got the professional side of things and we've got the university side of things, and that is a really difficult juggling act at times, because our students so want to go on and you know, get their professional qualifications at the end, and sometimes that is what they see as opposed to actually what we're doing, which is lifelong learning in the sector. So it is a real difficult thing to do. And you know, in terms of Sara's point about 24-hour for multiple choice, it's a way of minimizing, but equally students will still take photos and screenshots, and you know, I could answer the test first, and then I'll screenshot every question that I've got and I'll stick them in my WhatsApp group for everybody to go around, and somewhere within that somebody will get the same question. So you know, I personally would prefer to have a much tighter time slot than 24 hours. If they've only got 2 hours to do it, they do it at 2 hours from the time that the test starts, or whatever it happens to be, rather than having this allowing for time slots, because at the end of the day, students are studying a degree in a university in the UK. And I know with COVID it has been changed, and we have allowed students to study online because they can't travel. But I think going forward, it's something that we need to consider. And I can see Samantha with her hand up. So Samantha, please.
I just wanted to come in on Julie's point. I'm at the University of Bristol, and we were so worried about the MCQ issue. So we did have MCQs in our traditional exams. We actually removed MCQs from our exams altogether. And we tried to very much go down a route of setting some computational elements and then getting the students to actually setting some part of the question, so they had to kind of explain their understanding a lot more, so explain how they got to that number, and really going for those kind of analytical and high level skills. I'm very fortunate, I'll echo what other people have said, my main unit is auditing, so it's really simple to do it for auditing. And actually I was really struck by, in my summer exams, how similar it was to a standard exam in terms of what the students came up with, and they didn't actually really come up with anything that I thought they particularly copied. We also ran everything through Turnitin, and we'd really read them the riot act about they would get caught if they were plagiarising. I think I have one student who plagiarised my own lecture notes, and so luckily that student didn't do very well. And we also had time constrained exams. So we just, as a standard in our department, just gave them the normal time for their exam, and then we gave them another hour to submit, just because we were so worried, because we do have a lot of international students. We were so worried about being able to submit. when we looked at our student base, we tended to find that there were hardly any students to the west of us, and nearly all of our students were to the east of us. So we just really put our foot down with our timetablers, and we said, look, we've got professional accreditation, we need to be more robust, we have to have the 9 o'clock slot for exams, and we just basically didn't shift on that. I'm trying to think what else we did. Oh, I would say I am slightly concerned that, and again, ICAW hand over the ears, that for some of the very computational exams, and I'd echo what Anne said about, you know, the second year papers in particular that are heavily computational, I was slightly suspicious of how high our pass rates were, but we just had to do something. Yeah, it's been really, really valuable to hear the points about proctoring. So proctoring, I got approached by the university about it, and at the time, because we weren't being forced to do it, we decided, and because we felt on reflection that actually our experience in the summer was okay with the model that we had, we didn't actually force that through. But it's been terrifically valuable to actually hear the conversation on, come on, actually proctoring doesn't do anything. And we are toying with the kind of Viva idea, but it's very difficult with the numbers. But kind of that's where we are at. And actually we did give up some of our accreditation. So some of our units that are taught by other schools who refuse to go to our time limited model, so our law school refused to do that, and they refused to set exams, they would only set coursework. So we had to give up our accreditation on that unit. So that's where we were.
Thank you. That's really interesting to hear that. I mean, in Swansea, we've taken the decision this year to, well, this time around, just purely for the exemption modules to run them on a timed basis. Everything else is on the 24-hour. But where an exemption module, you know, where it sits for an exemption, we've gone down the timed route. Now we might tighten that for other modules as we go through, but we're just trying to pick off the most important ones to start with, and if that works well for the exemption modules, and we don't have problems running that as a mechanism, I think we'll probably try and push that through some of the other modules within the department, within the school. But it's just little steps every time, rather than just seeing what works, rather than putting everything through and then it all crashing.
Yeah, I should say, Sarah, that time-based approach was on our accredited units, but we carry ICAW and ACCA accreditation and CIMA accreditation. So we very much took that approach on those units. And then the other units that weren't accredited, the university very much pushed us towards a coursework only module. So we did have a little bit of dissatisfaction from our students when they were comparing to other departments and what they were doing. And we just had to do a lot of communication with our students that, you know, this was because of the professional accreditation, which obviously upset those who don't care about that. But, you know, hey, we'd not come across this before, and we just had to make that decision.
Julie, you've got your hand raised, and I think Joe, I don't know whether Joe's hand is raised or just stroking her cat, but we'll go with Julie first, and then, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm just, that's good to hear, Sarah, what you've done at Swansea, and I'm just sat here now and I'm thinking, knowing how I have to negotiate with my Pro Vice Chancellor Teacher of Learning, and indeed my Associate Dean Teaching and Learning, I just had this idea that the administrators will hate me for this, and I hate to separate academics out from administrators, but it's just struck me that if they want the exemption, the exam starts from a 24-hour period at 9 o'clock, and if they want the exemption, they have to do it from 9 till 12 plus the additional time. And if they don't want the exemption, then they can do it in the other part of the 24-hour period. I'm just trying to think whether that works, because it's been a long week. Am I thinking logically there?
I can come in on that because some of our courses are accredited by the Institute of Actuaries, I think it is. It's a program for maths and it's actuarial sciences degree run by our maths department, and they take some of our courses, and that is what they want to do. I would have loved to have pressed for this for our accredited accounting exams, but the ICAW did not require me to do that, and therefore I've got no basis for asking my university to approve this. Okay, so there is a precedent there. The Institute, whatever it is for actuaries, whatever it's called, requires this. And so we have a really big course of something like, because we've over recruited so much, it's got something like 900 students on it, of which 50, I think, are doing this maths and science, maths, actuarial sciences degree, and they've got to sit it in the first 2 hours that it's open in order to meet the professional body accreditations. One way in which we thought we could do that if we were required to in Manchester was that you give that those students a different course code, and then it's easy for admin to work it out. But as I say, ICAW did not require us to do that, and so for our accounting students, they can sit it at any point in the 24 hours. So yeah, it would be quite interesting to hear the view from the ICAW, or if they're happy to give us a view on that, or if they want to think about it. That would be really helpful.
Kirsty or Dominic?
Apologies, I was just going back to Greg in the chat. Do you want to run it by me again, or Dom, did you pick that up?
Sorry, yeah, could you repeat again as well? Sorry,
Sorry, yeah, I was just saying that one of our courses, it's a first year accounting, introduction to accounting course, is a core course for students taking the BSc in actuarial sciences, and it's accredited by the Institute of Actuaries. And they have said that they require students to sit this within a closed time frame. So the University of Manchester has said that the minimum access window is 24 hours, and within that we set, I think this exam is 2.5 hours. So the students on this BSc Actuarial Sciences have to take this exam in the first 2.5 hours, otherwise it will not count towards their exemption. And I've suggested that the way to achieve this easily for admin is that you give those students a course code that is different to the other students. Everything else is the same, but they're on a different course code so that it's easy to manage administratively. And I then said, I would have liked to have done this for our accredited accounting exams if students wanted the exemption, or they were on one of our specific BSc accounting or BSc business accounting programs, but the ICAW did not require us to do that, and therefore I couldn't impose it. I would not be able to write a rationale to my university to get them to agree to that. So all of our courses, the minimum amount of time is 24 hours, 2-hour exams within 24 hours. Anything over 2 exams is over 48 hours. I've had to write a rationale for exams that go over 2 hours to the university, not got a reply yet. I've been working on this since July, believe it or not. It's doing my head in. You know, why couldn't the ICAW have given more specific guidance? I guess it's a very direct question. We want it that directly.
Yeah, I think, and I don't know whether Judy covered it last time. Judy's our head of accreditation who couldn't be here today. But in our conversations with the FRC, there's been some loosening of the regulations to try and support the hundreds of universities that we work with. So it's between a rock and a hard place of imposing firmer things that would support you in your aims, whereas we've had other universities come to us and say, we need that 24-hour window to make it work. So they've given us permission to relax the rules around credit for prior learning, which we could do for the academic year 2020 to 2021. And I would expect it would revert back to that if the world has gone back to normal by then. But we're not in a position as a professional body to tell your university what to do in that regards. We can obviously what Judy wanted to know is what every institution was planning on doing and keeping an audit trail for when we are inspected by the FRC. And if there's a variety of different approaches taken by universities, then we're happy to support that. But I think Judy has to manage that relationship and know that it's as a robust exam as it can be, but try and work within the perimeter of what's going to work with every university that we're dealing with, and that's on the CPL directory. So in your pleas to the rest of your staff to limit it to that 2 hours, yeah, I'm sure we could write a letter of support, but it's not a blanket thing that we can say we want all universities to do, or go to the FRC and say this is what we're imposing on universities. It's got to be, this works for your institution, this is how we're going to quality assure it, and have that dialogue. So yeah, I appreciate it's hard and it's different for all universities.
Yeah, so
Fine. I mean, I have had individual conversations with Judy in the past. Couldn't make the October meeting. I just find it interesting that we do have an example of another UK professional body making this an absolute requirement that the university has to comply with.
Thank you for that. I would just say I read, when we had the previous meeting, I took the ICAW's intonation in what they were saying. I appreciate from Kirsty that you can't stipulate what you do, but I read that as you would like us to. So I went back to my university and said, the ICAW would like us to, and this is what we're doing, which is why we went down but I do understand, Anne, that, different institutions are different. Yours is perhaps more, has a different set of bureaucracies to hit than ours. And so, yeah, and I understand the professional body position in that as well. There's a couple of hands up. I've got Paul with a hand up. So Paul, please come.
Yeah, it was a couple of points. One is picking up on one that Anne said. We've got experience of doing that kind of double-coded modules in another context. We've got some modules on our non-accounting programs that are taught with accounting students in the room, and the students effectively follow exactly the same curriculum, but the module has two codes, and one of those codes has coursework specified as the assessment, and the other code has an exam specified as the assessment. And the students that are on the accounting degree do the version of the module with an exam in, and the students that have been put on the for want of a better word, dumping ground degree do the assessment which has got coursework in. And that's just quite a neat way of separating it out. It doesn't put off students that might choose that as an option just because it has an exam, but it means it can still be counted towards an accreditation. I guess the second point to pick up on is this issue of potentially the difference between what the professional bodies say they would like and what universities interpret as the absolute minimum we could get away with. And thinking a little bit more long term, I guess one of my sort of higher level concerns is that difference might then manifest itself in 2 or 3 years' time with students that have been awarded exemptions from professional exams and then crash and burn the first time they sit in inverted commas, really demanding exam. And with all the implications that has for long-term accreditation and the impact it has on students that may feel as if they've been sold a false promise.
Sorry, I'm trying to do something on the chat and got stuck in the chat there. Trying to come to sort that. Greg, Greg's got his hand raised, I think. So, Greg.
It's in relation. I mean, I asked the question from Kirsty, Dominic, if any of their exams are on demand, i.e., anytime, anywhere, any whatever. And their first level exams, as I understand it, which is what CFAB. I always have difficulty pronouncing it, and most of the exemptions we get are at that level. And consequently, perhaps we should be only thinking about the necessity of security of assessment to the same degree that they do. Now, if the situation, I mean, I know they had big random selection of questions, and I know one of the postings in the thing said before, well, students can screenshot stuff and they can load it. I mean, I'd just be interested to know whether ICAW have checked to see whether questions from their question banks are stored somewhere in black cyberspace, perhaps, with screenshots of the questions which could also be remembered. And I just wonder, A, whether they've checked, and if they haven't, why they haven't, or are they convinced that the question set is so large that it's not a problem? I mean, I'm just asking because I just want to put it onto us. I don't want us to take on an expectation which is more extreme than one which is from the accrediting body. I mean, it's as simple as that, really. Looks like Kirsty wants to answer because she's taken a mic off. So.
Well, I think the question bank is pretty large, and but yeah, I'd need to speak to our team that looks after CFAB to know whether anybody's done any research about you know, monitoring screenshots and various things like that. I mean, it's still exam conditions, still go through the ID checks and all the rest of it, but I think we're very confident that the bank of questions is rotated and large enough to be secure.
So long as our question sets are large enough and reasonably secure, then we shouldn't be particularly worried about it. That's really, but we can't do it on the cheap. I mean, let's not pretend we can do it on the cheap. That's the issue. Is we as institutions have to come up to reasonable standard in the criteria of our assessment, and we shouldn't be expecting the institutes to lower their standards. If necessary, we should drop our accreditations. You know, if we're particularly worried about it. I don't think we are. I mean, I don't think it's Glasgow. I don't think we are particularly concerned about the integrity of our questions. Perhaps some questions at some levels, but they're probably such a small proportion that it doesn't really make a massive difference. But I suspect that's the case everywhere. And the issue, I mean, I did post, I mean, about the technical possibility of creating individualized papers. I've done it in the past. I did it in 1990s with a spreadsheet which pulled in the student's matric number and created individual increments to the, you know, it's part of the numbers in the questions were all randomly generated multiples taken from a random number which had used that number as the seed. It's not rocket science to do. Getting the technology to do it in an online environment is not one that I've looked at, I'll be honest, but I'm sure that they're there. And if not, we can create them and create individual exams for them preset if we really wanted to, and set each student an individual exam. This is not, you know, this is not massively difficult. I think we have to be inventive about how we set questions rather than say we can't do it. And complain when people say we're not going to be accredited because we're not doing our job right. We should be worried about it. If we think testing these things is important, it's part of the integral part of our degree, we should be concerned about it. And we should be doing something about it. As I say before, I hate multiple choice questions, so I wouldn't do it that way. If you could do the same thing, I mean, that's what I did. I did it with coursework, in fact, on one occasion. So set coursework financial account preparation based on random, you know, individualized questions. Yeah, they can copy the process from each other, but that, you know, most of the application is learning about the process and copying it anyway. So it's not, you know, what's the difference? I'm sorry to be a killjoy here in some respects, but
no, I mean, I wish I was technologically wise enough to do something like that, because it gets under my skin a bit. Personally, it gets under my skin a bit, but I haven't had time to sit down and perhaps perfect the technology, or perfect my understanding of the technology to actually do it. And I think that's part of the problem, is we don't have the time necessarily all the time that we have, we use in other ways. So Anne, sorry, come in, please.
Can I just come in, because one of my colleagues did actually spend a lot of time doing exactly this in our June exams. It was actually on our master's programme, and she could do this because it was only a small cohort of around about 50 students. And what she did was she set multiple choice questions using pools and sets, and then as a follow-up to those questions, the students then had to, which was the combination then became more or less unique for each student, and the student then had to produce short answers giving the explanations to the workings for all of these questions. And so as a robust assessment, it worked very well, but it took her absolutely ages to mark it. And this was the key problem. So I'm not sure whether she will do that for her June exam. She's currently working on a cohort of 400 third-year undergraduate students, and it's not possible to do that because it's the marking where you then get an unachievable, you cannot get through the marking in the time available if you have sufficiently demanding individual assessments. So I think you're quite right. I think there are packages that you can use to set much more individualized questions. Some of my colleagues who are more in finance are using Mobius, which is quite frankly beyond me, because I don't have a I have a non-numerical first degree, so, I'm not quite sure how I'm an accounting professor, but there we go. So I don't understand Mobius, but my sort of very superficial understanding is that you can use that package to do what you're suggesting, and some of my colleagues are trying that at the moment with some of these cohorts, because obviously the upside, if you put in a lot of time getting your question bank ready, then you save all that marking time, and if you've got large cohorts of students, that's a real benefit. So we spent a lot of time in the summer getting databases of questions, but then everybody benefited in terms of the marking. So yeah, individualized courseworks would be great if you've got a small cohort. It's absolutely, I think, the right thing to be doing. And it gets over a lot of these problems about copying from each other, in that students can still share ideas and so on, but the actual work has to be their own, which I think for me removes most of the problems around cheating. Some of my colleagues would disagree because they're paranoid about this, but it is just the academic time spent marking that then becomes a problem if you have a cohort of over 50 students. I think it just becomes untenable. So
thank you for
I would say though that we found if you set sensible essay style questions, then it does seem to get around an awful lot of the problems. The problems we have, as I said before, are in the sort of the technical intermediate areas where you've got to test the technical skills, and you can't just make it a more conceptual type evaluation type assignment as you would get on a final year undergraduate course.
Greg, your hand is still up. Is that just it's left up, or
I was about to put it up, but it was left up. So if nobody else is going to, I'll.
No, the floor is yours. I was going to ask a proctoring question, but your floor is yours.
And it's to do with this middle range set of, what is it we're trying to test in those application questions, the technical questions, and what is it that really our students are likely to have to do at that level in the real world? Yes, there's going to be some necessity to do these things in some institutions, what the employers are saying is not that they want people who can necessarily do the technical stuff, but they can interpret it, can understand it. So is it, you know, in that middle section that you keep talking about, should we be setting them questions which ask them to do it, or should we be giving them the results, some data and some analysis, and saying, tell us what it means? And in a sense, what I'm saying is, should we be testing the way that you're suggesting, or can we turn them into essay questions, which is what, I'll be honest, that's what we've tried to do, you know, almost all the way down the scale, not just to the middle, but to the lower level too, as possible. And what I'm saying in part is there's a, you know, I do think, and you probably know from my accounting history stuff, that I think double entry bookkeeping is important. But that doesn't necessarily mean we have to set an exam where we ask them to go through a whole load of invoices and put them through the accounts. In fact, I don't remember setting an exam like that in a degree level for many, many years. But what we can do is give them some ideas about some journals and ask them to discuss whether they're right or not, to correct after some entries, or do you know what I mean? I mean, we just need to be more inventive and stop doing what we've always done just because that's what we've always done. Might not have been the best thing to do in the first place, but certainly now times changed. And I mean, how much accounting is done by accountants? Tiny amounts of the process. Accountants have got to be able to interpret those numbers, and knowing how they're created will make them interpret them better. So we test whether they understand the basis of the process by testing whether they can interpret it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Greg, but I think that we kind of run scared at the moment because of the professional body side of things, and that's not a dig at the professional bodies, because it goes back to this. What are we trying to achieve? Are we trying to achieve and using the professional body exemptions as a selling point for the course, or are we doing the lifelong learning? And I agree with you that it's.
But the professional bodies are trying to serve the same employer needs as we are in large part. So perhaps it's for us to be lobbying ICAW, who are here, and the others who aren't here, to change their attitude too. I mean, I
think we've always said, and our message to students whenever we talk to them is really it's not about exemptions or accreditation. It's about proving to employers that you've got the skills that they're looking for. And you're right, technical skills are right at the bottom of the scale. And you know, we do have students looking at our directories, looking at the university partnerships that we say, which is the degree that will give me the most exemptions, and you know, we say you shouldn't be looking at it from that point of view. So I do understand that the mechanisms that we have been built on this long history of accreditation, but we will work with any universities with however full exemptions, all 8 down to 1 or 2, and we'll work with them on numerous things beyond accreditation. So maybe we just need to look a bit wider than those limitations and change students' perception of what that accreditation actually means.
And there is.
I was going to say, sorry, Dom. I was just going to say that wasn't a specific dig at any of the bodies, but at times we do get responses back which say this isn't like our exam papers or the style of our exam questions, and therefore we have to decide whether we change the style of our exam questions to fit so that we maintain our exemptions, or we continue down the route of how we might want to test and then lose the exemption. And that's it. That's not aimed at a particular body.
No offense taken, and we know we have this conversation all the time and every year, and I feel like we're all saying the same thing. It's just a long-term thing that we've lived with over the years.
Yeah, Dominic.
Sorry, Dom, did you want to add anything?
I was just going to say that there is still that, you know, flexibility around accreditation, you know, that because it's based on learning outcomes. A lot of the time when assessments are changed, it's if the syllabus is the same and the learning outcomes are still covered, even if they're covered in a different way, it usually is still fine for accreditation. You know, we wouldn't say that because we have multiple choice exams that university has to have multiple choice or anything like that. So there is still that flexibility there. And yeah, and I think Judy would still say the same, that, you know, we can still, there is still flexibility in, you know, within the accreditation that we can offer. But we can only, again, we can only speak for ourselves.
Yeah,
I'll
quite
be
often
honest,
first year modules provided by universities go far above and beyond what we require for accreditation, and we recognise that.
Yeah, and
I've never found ICAW a problem, I'll be honest.
And I was going to just, I was going to say the same. It wasn't, you know, I would agree with Greg on that one. You have been, you know, you've come out, you've made your position, you've stated what you wanted to do, and that whilst it, you know, at the start of lockdown, it took a while to get to that. But since we've sort of had that position, you know, I would commend you on the way that you have worked with us and been flexible and spoken to us, etc. So yes, it's not. I agree with Greg that I haven't had any issues with your accounting body, and you're here with us today as well, which is which shows that that speaks volumes as well, that you're interested to share in the debate as well and to listen to the issues and concerns that we have. So thank you.
I do think some of it is us second guessing what the institutes or associations are going to demand, and not actually being competent enough in our own assessments of what we're doing in order to take them to the bodies and argue our case.
Yeah.
I don't actually think even the body that we have most problem with is as bad as many people think they are, in terms of how close we are to their exams, because our exams are nowhere near theirs, and we've argued and got away with these in my mind, but I don't mean that. I mean, we've actually persuaded them that what we're doing is at least as good as what they would be doing, and that's fine. But I do think there's a mentality amongst us as academics sometimes that we have to follow the institute's processes, and we shouldn't do that if we don't think it's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was going to say, I was going to, well, no, sorry, and I was going to take us back to, I was going to have a question about going back to the proctoring side of things. So, but Anne, if you're still on this, please do come in.
I'm going to say, in an attempt to be positive, because I think there are positives that can come out of this. And this is that it is making everybody think much more carefully about how they do assessments. And I think that can only benefit the accounting academia in the UK, because we're having to think through in a pedagogic way much more carefully how and what we are testing. And you know, I would really hope that we can see the standards, you know, rise across the board in terms of how we are approaching our assessment. It's back to where we started with the points Paul was making at the beginning. We need to think much more carefully, you know, what we are testing, why we're testing it, and come up with good, robust assessments. Yes, we need to be aware of some of the issues around cheating. I share quite a bit of what Greg said about that, but not entirely. I think cheating does go on a lot, as Joe was saying. But you know, I would hope that we can all think about this and spend more time thinking about our assessments. I know we're all short of time, but I would hope that by having this sort of discussion, then everybody can, you know, try and be a bit more, not just look at what we did last year and be incremental, but be a bit more innovative in what we're doing overall. And that could be something good that comes out of all of this.
I completely agree with you, Anne. I think that is something that it is making us think. And perhaps in the short term, we're you know, we're firefighting and putting perhaps an interim mechanism in, and rather than perhaps going the full innovative hog in one move. But I agree with you. It's something that it is food for thought, like the way that we're teaching is food for thought, and the way that we're having to do things. You know, I'm already at the point of thinking, well, what's going to happen? How are we going to transition forward, and I say, when I say forward, I mean, you know, back to campus, as it were, or back to some sort of, you know, I don't know how do, you know, how do we come out of this the other end, and as part of that, assessment has to form part of that debate. Mike, I was just thinking that, you know, we started at the beginning talking about proctoring, and Kirsty said as part of theirs that, you know, their proctors look at the you know, a sample or look at the videos, etc. That's something I think that we would probably have difficulty in universities doing, is because we haven't got the resource to go back through and look at that. And I don't think necessarily our regulations we'd need to rewrite various elements of regulations in terms of getting, you know, how do you treat unfair practice through that, and what is unfair practice in, you know, in a proctored exam, because we haven't got experience of that yet. But I'd say the conversation has sort of gone from, it's not really, respondents is not really very good, and, you know, as Greg has demonstrated with his glasses, he could be reading multiple screens. You know, I'm the same. I can see parts of the screen very clearly, and parts of the keyboard quite clearly with my glasses, but that's about it. But, you know, that it was just a sort of a question about, you know, if anybody has used the proctoring side of things, how do we manage that other, you know, the other side, perhaps the less nice side, the negative.
Can I say that in relation to the cost of proctoring, I don't know about your institution, but we don't invigilate our own exams. We pay invigilators to invigilate for us. Funnily enough, the university aren't spending that money. So actually, the cost is probably not the issue. It's just the willingness to spend the money. And that might be a problem at the current time. My institution isn't massively strapped, and we've actually got three accounting and 2 finance posts available in our department. So you know, it's not as if the cash is massively a problem. It's a willingness to do it, in large part, I think, because the benefit isn't seen. Because the fault is, on the whole, we should be writing better questions that don't need invigilation, as opposed to wasting a lot of money on all the technology and having people reviewing all the videos. And it's a matter of relative cost, probably, but you do have to add on to that the slight meanness of the centre of all universities anyway, I suspect, who do try and avoid costs. But if you really wanted it and really needed it, we should use the argument. But you're not spending all that money on invigilators, because they're not. They must be saving a fortune. Or hall rentals, which in our case is massive. Anyway, just say that.
Yeah,
I think it's if you're going to commit to the investment, if it's a long-term thing and you're likely to continue offering this kind of assessment going forward, then obviously it's probably worth the investment. And that's definitely our intention, is that, you know, we would keep with this. But if the intention is we all go back to normal and it's business as usual, then for a short term, I'm not too sure it would be worth your while.
I think there's a huge difference in cost between responders, which I don't think involves any sort of live person doing anything. My understanding is that they just create a report, and then it's up to the university as to what they do with that. And the system that the ICAW uses, which I can't remember what it's called, but there is a huge difference in cost between the two. And obviously my university would only pay for responders, and it would only pay for them for our ICAW accredited courses across the university. So although I don't really want to be in this position, I'm now in the position where we're sort of leading on this programme, in the use of responders for the university. It's hugely, I don't know, my university is just so incredibly bureaucratic. It took me, I think, 2 months to get a meeting set up to discuss it. And then the IT person was extremely dismissive about proctoring altogether for the reasons that we've heard already. when I said, well, I really do need to make sure that our exams are robust and will meet the requirements of the ICAW. They then, I think it was 2 weeks ago, I started this process at the end of June. 2 weeks ago, I was told they had agreed to it, and now our IT department has got to run a pilot study on it and get it sort of working in the system, put it so that it will work with the rest of the university systems. So it's not just sort of buying in a program and you're set to go. There's all these other processes to go through, and I have to get agreement through one. If I think at school level, at faculty level, at university level, all of this took months and loads of bureaucracy. By which time I'd really have had more than enough of it, and we haven't even got it running yet. We're now hoping to run pilots with it before Christmas, in the hope that it will be in place in time for January. So it's not something to be undertaken lightly. Our university is obviously hoping to go back to normal face-to-face exams going forward, and when our BSc Business Accounting program, which is a Flying Start program in partnership with PwC, when that reaches the point where we're assessing the Golden 4 courses, ICAW papers, I think we would be saying, well, look, these students are going to have to sit those papers, in person, because we have no other way of guaranteeing that we will meet the ICAW requirements. Because I can't see the university agreeing to what we would need for those students to sit them remotely. So I'm hoping that, well, that's sufficiently in the future for us that it won't be a problem. But it's been a lot of personal investment for a very limited return from our perspective so far.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were looking and went down that sort of route, but decided that to try and do it and get it up and running for the number of modules that we needed to get it up and running for was just going to be too much of a steep learning curve in a very short space of time, et cetera, et cetera. So I wish you luck with the piloting of it, and please, I'm sure I will be in touch to see how how you get on with it, because it was something that we were looking at, and we've got responders, but we decided to step back from it because it was just a bridge too far. It was going to break somebody's back in terms of trying to get it done, and so we did step back from that. So I was just going to have a quick look at the chat. There was a couple of yep, certainly, yes, Dominic, that's, yeah, fine, if please do. And you could also link it into the BAFA LinkedIn page as well, because that gets quite good coverage as well. Siobhan is asking if anybody wants to leave university contact details in the chat. I think actually looking at the chat or looking at the attendees, everybody apart from Mohammed, who I'm not sure, Mohammed, where if you could unmute yourself perhaps and tell us where you're from. But everybody else I know are currently members, I think, of CDAF as a network. But Mohammed, I don't know if Mohammed could identify himself.
Also, what's Mohammed's queries or concerns? Can we make sure because we've got a good group here to address. It's supposed to be a mutual help.
Maybe not.
Maybe he's logged on and gone away.
Yeah, maybe. There we go. And Samantha's been and collected children from school and come back.
I didn't say that. Mine are beyond school age, but anyway.
No, and I managed to listen to the conversation all the way through as well. So so I'm up to speed. Thank you.
Good on you. Vijay and Gillian, you are with us. Have we been able to answer some of the queries, or what might you be doing differently in your institutions?
Yeah, it's been really useful for me. Particularly the concern I've got is we might be agreeing to provide exemptions for students, but will we be able to fulfill that? So I do have a kind of fear in the back of my mind that the plug might be pulled. So I'm making promises to students. They've bought into the degree based on the number of exemptions we can provide, and then they'll leave and then maybe not be granted those. That is a fear that I have. We're using 24-hour windows.
I mean, I do get the feeling that as long as the learning outcomes are, which is what the professional bodies are looking for, as long as the learning outcomes are being assessed and are being assessed in as robust a manner as possible, because I've had similar sort of questions in terms of, if we're doing a 24-hour window, or are we doing a time constraint? And I've had sort of a mixture of responses in terms of it's not up to us to determine how you actually do the assessment as long as the learning outcomes are met. So I think, whilst obviously I can't speak for the professional bodies, but Dominic and Kirsty have both nodding there, and in the various conversations we've had from them, I think, say, as long as you are sticking to your learning outcomes, and I understand that some of the other professional bodies are wanting to see copies of papers that are being used in the assessment. So that's a whole administrative task to pull together all of the exam papers to send them off to be assessed. And I think you should, as long as the learning outcomes are assessed, they're not stipulating, and I say Kirsty and Dominic have said, they're not stipulating a specific time requirement. Whilst they can recommend, they cannot tell us that we have to do. Samantha, sorry.
That's really useful, thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say as well that we're, since I've become accreditations manager, Gillian, we're always terribly conditional in our language when we talk about exemptions. Everywhere where we talk about exemptions, it's, this may, and we try not to stipulate the number of exemptions as well. And you can always explain that to students, because we don't know how our programs are necessarily going to change. We don't know how the institutes are going to change their requirements. So you can never, ever promise students you're definitely going to get 6 exemptions or whatever it is.
That's true.
So we always explain it, and I have to always re-explain myself every single year when students are choosing options, but I always speak about it in that way. So that's one thing. And I just wanted to come in on the accounting professional body that is asking for papers that you may have received an email from fairly recently. There's no way I can send papers. It's, our exams are in January. So I guess that's going to be most people's stance, that the thought of actually sending out a paper before it's been issued to students is just an absolute no-no for me.
Yeah,
so I don't know if...
But we do this for the June exams as well.
Yes.
Body. And again, we just sent them after the assessment period, and we're just putting, I think I've just sent this to my administrator, and she, to our assessments manager, and we're putting the date of the 12th of February on our paper. I've not done the rest of it yet because I'm waiting to have an accreditations coordinator, because I shouldn't be doing all this. I meant to be the head of teaching. I meant to just deal with strategy, not doing all this stuff as well. So that's what we're doing. 12th of February, we're saying.
And I did get in a bit of trouble with that accounting body, because at Bristol, our assessment period in the summer was very, very late, because we locked down very early and we pushed everything down the road. So we were very, very late. And I just thought, I'm here again thinking, I can't release this paper. So that's really reassuring. Thank you.
Yeah, I should. We've all got to say that. There's no way they can have access to papers before the students have sat them. That's completely inappropriate. But it's not clear. It's not clear that that's what they are asking for, because you can just put a date in, and they're not. Anybody who provides papers in advance is perhaps being taken in by them. I think they're being, they're playing a bit of a game possibly there.
Thanks, Anne.
Yeah, that's really useful. Yep. Dominic.
I was just going to quickly say, really to Jill, if you're ever in any doubt or you have any concerns, around accreditation, just to email Judy Dimmock, who is our head of accreditation, and she is looking at every university partner that we have, asking for them to email in all of their what they're doing with their assessments and looking at that, because although there is flexibility and the FRC have allowed us to be flexible, we still have to accredit exams. We can't accredit coursework. So mostly all universities that we've had feedback from have they've all been pretty much fine. Up to 24 hours, absolutely fine. But if it was a week to do an exam, that wouldn't be acceptable. But if you have any doubts, just to email us, Kirsty or Ryan, we can pass you on to Judy. But yeah, it's really that she's sort of looking at every university is sort of a case by case and offering advice as well.
Thank you for that reassurance, Dominic.
Yeah, because I mean, the thing that we found also that actually having a 24-hour window increases the stress level for students, and in particular those who have extra time, because they had extra time on top of the 24 hours because they need extra time, and they get, if somebody gets 50%, or they might get, more extra time, making an exam available for them to do over 2 or 3 days, that's horrendous, so, but then you've got people complaining that they don't want to do it in 2 hours because that's far too tight a time, but then we stretch it out so we can, we're not going to be able to win on that. So I think probably we are coming. Well, I don't think we're coming towards the end of time, but it's not. We're not at the end of the time that we had allocated together. But I think probably we've. It's been very reassuring from my perspective to hear what other people are doing, and I think we've had a healthy debate in terms of some of the issues there. And thank you to the ICAEW for coming and I say very much reassuring our members of that what we're actually doing is along the right lines. So that's been really helpful. Thank you for your input today. Does anybody else have anything else that they would like to add before we wrap this up? And I say we will get it available. Hopefully, I'm going to please speak to Shay and to Paul and hopefully get it available on the new CDAF YouTube channel, which is linked to the BAFA web YouTube channel as well. So it will be available for people to put round and to watch. So thank you very much indeed for your time this afternoon. And please do get in touch if there's anything that we can help you with.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Well, look,
Take
brilliant.
care.
Cheers now.